Hello everyone. So today we are going to be reading a book of mine called Fire in the Heart. But first, remember to like and subscribe. So today we are going to be reading chapter 1. Ireland, Stephen Glover said, as the class sat up straight to play a game of Name That Country. He sat up on his seat as the bus he was riding on zoomed through the wilderness. Trees and rivers zoomed by as he watched. All the way, huge mountains had towered over the area, their snowy peaks shining high above the clouds. Finally, the bus arrived at its destination, a castle with a huge moor surrounding it. Crows flew high above the tallest tower, and the whole castle was the color of coal black. Finally, the bus driver turned around, saying, "Let's stop here. We'll take a quick break for 30 minutes. Feel free to explore the area." Stephen got up off his seat and walked down the aisle. Suddenly, someone pushed him, and he stumbled on the hard black floor. "Ow!" he exclaimed. Looking around, he saw Ross Ditman and Pansy Sneed, the class bullies, walking away. Let them walk away, he thought. They got nothing from hurting other people. Sighing, he turned away from them and kept on walking down the aisle. The bright sun blinded him as he walked off the bus's stairway. Blinking, he looked around. Trees surrounded the mansion from a faraway distance, but closer to the mansion was a huge moor, which spread for many miles into the distance. Tall mountains surrounded the area, and a civilization felt 100 miles away. Turning away, he saw his friends Kamari Okori and Maisie Mai standing together off to the side. As usual, a camera hung from Maisie's neck, and as he walked toward them, he heard the familiar click of the camera. Kamari and Maisie turned to him as he arrived. "Look around," Maisie said, gesturing to the wilderness. "It's so beautiful." Stephen nodded. "It surprised me too when I came outside," he said. Kamari had turned to peer at the castle. "Looks creepy," he murmured. "Let's go over there." The crows had stopped hovering over the castle's tower, and as the three, Stephen, Kamari, and Maisie, walked over to the door, the crows landed on a nearby tree and began to call loudly. Hearing the loud noise, Stephen looked around and hurried quickly into the castle. Kamari sighed. How could a person be afraid of birds? Walking into the castle, the three peered around. Spider webs sat at the roof of the room, and paintings of old people were hung on the wall. As Stephen watched, a spider dropped down from the ceiling. Kamari shuddered and ducked away. The spider dropped to the floor and hurried down a passageway. Stephen looked at the two and then at the spider. "Let's follow it," he said. "Do we have to?" muttered Kamari, but he still followed his friends into the dark. Finally, the group saw a light at the end of the passageway and hurried toward it. They emerged from the darkness and found themselves in a huge room with a huge chair in the middle. Stephen and Maisie gasped. It was a throne room, they thought. While Maisie fumbled out her camera and took a picture, Kamari inspected the chair and its surroundings. Suddenly he exclaimed, "This is solid gold," and promptly sat on it. "Take a picture," he said, and Maisie took a picture. All this time Stephen had been looking around, thinking, "Why don't we explore the tower?" he asked. Kamari slid off the chair, and off they went, climbing up the vertical staircase to get to the very top. Inside was not much, except for a few boxes which, to Stephen's surprise, were very heavy and could not be opened. Kamari shook his head and said, "Leave them alone. They're not even ours." Stephen nodded and dropped them. All this while, Maisie had been looking out the window. Suddenly she gasped. "Look!" she cried. Stephen and Kamari hurried over to the window, just in time to see the flock of crows dive bomb the driver. The driver ran over to the bus, and without even looking at the schoolchildren, drove away toward the mountains. The three hurried out of the castle, but by the time they got to the road, the bus was gone, and all that was left was a small trail of dust. Kamari bent over, breathing heavily. "How do we get home?" he asked. Nobody answered him. The rest of the class, hearing the commotion, ran over to see what had happened. Remo gasped, finally grasping the severity of the situation. "Now what?" he asked. Maisie looked around and answered him. "Why don't we explore the castle in groups?" The class nodded, and she turned to make the groups. Stephen, Maisie, and Kamari would be one. Paola, and Remo would be one, while Arif and Pascal would be another. Camila Lunette would be one, and Ross would be partners with Pansy. The rest of the class would focus on making a fire near the road. After hearing this, the class cheered up a bit, and as the groups entered the castle, they were already thinking about that saving would be just around the corner. Chapter 2.